One day, when humanity once again faced a pandemic, it was unable to cope. The collapsed health system was unable to withstand the virus, so the virus began to mutate, and with it the people. The pandemic spread so quickly that people became sick and then turned into vicious creatures that wanted only one thing: meat and pure human blood. Along with the virus, witches and their magic began to emerge from the dark corners of the world. In the beginning, the witches fought the mutants, but later it grew so fast and rapidly that the devil and his demons broke free and there was nothing to hold them back anymore. Now the mutants and the uncharted ruled the god-forsaken world, while the survivors tried to find shelter and not die from anyone's bite or be eaten or gutted by the demons. And so began the macabre story of Matthew and Ashley as they began their pursuit for a place of safety. Matthew, whose sister Ashley was bitten by some creature, tried his best to save his sister and not lose hope of a town where they wouldn't be alone and could heal Ashley. But at the beginning of their journey, they had no idea that they would face the most terrifying danger of all. On their way to the big city where they were promised a cure, they noticed that someone was following them. At first, they didn't give it much thought, since it could have just been another survivor. However, as they moved deeper into the area, the sightings became more insistent and more terrifying. They heard footsteps behind them, but when they turned around, there was no one there. The first danger was the infected people they encountered along the way, but then things got much worse. They found an abandoned house in which they decided to spend the night. But within minutes of settling in for the night, strange things began to happen. Their belongings began to move, doors began to open and close, and someone was screaming and banging on the windows. Matthew and Ashley realized that there was something unclean in the house. They went outside, but quickly realized that it wasn't safe here either. They were approached by two survivors who offered to help them, but they looked strange and their behavior was incomprehensible. They later realized that these people were some kind of mutants who had mutated because of the pandemic. Matthew and Ashley tried to escape, but quickly realized they had nowhere to go. They were trapped and now they would have to fight for their lives against the mutants who were constantly chasing them. By some miracle in the darkness of this gloomy place, they found shelter in the basement of an abandoned building, but quickly realized that there was something or someone else there besides them. They heard whispers and noises behind the wall. Matthew began searching the basement and found a door that led to a secret room. In the room, they found notes left by the previous occupant of the place. The records described how he had experimented on infected people, trying to find a cure for the pandemic. But something went wrong, and he became a victim of his own experiments, turning into a mutant. Matthew and Ashley realized that they were in the lair of this mutant, and that it could return at any moment. They began to look for a way out, but all around them were dark corridors and closed doors. They heard a noise in the distance and realized that the mutant had returned. They tried to run, but the mutant was faster and started chasing them. Matthew and Ashley were forced to fight for their lives against the mutant using everything they had at hand. They had only sharp objects, crowbars, and lights at their disposal. They battled the mutant in the narrow corridors. Matthew snatched a kerosene lamp and threw it at the mutant while it burned. Ashley spotted a way out of this horrible place. When they got outside, they were exhausted and frightened. They realized that they had very little time left to get Ashley to a major city where there might be a cure for the pandemic. Their journey became even more dangerous, and they didn't know what awaited them next. Matthew grabbed Ashley's hand and they ran through the abandoned town, but the mutant kept up with them. Soon they found themselves at a dead end and realized that they wouldn't be able to escape. The mutant approached them, and they saw his contorted face and outstretched arms. He began to attack them. Matthew and Ashley realized that they didn't have much time left. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a mysterious hooded figure appeared, holding a sword. The figure attacked the mutant, chopping it into pieces, but when they tried to address it, it disappeared. They were left alone with their thoughts and feelings of fear, realizing that they were no longer alone in this world, and that their world was no longer the way it had been. They knew that this nightmare would haunt them until the end. As the mysterious hooded figure dealt with the mutant, it was already dawn outside. Matthew noticed the metal container where they decided to rest and wait for day. The container had nothing but rags on the floor. That's how they settled in. A few hours later, Matthew opened the door and saw that the sun behind the red clouds was already at its zenith. He started to wake Ashley, but her body was already cold. She had no chance of surviving much longer without the vaccine. Matthew had no choice but to walk toward the city alone. But he didn't want to leave Ashley there, for sooner or later she would rise up and want to eat someone. He accepted things as they were and resigned himself to the fact that he could not save his sister. Matthew set fire to the rags that were on the floor of the container, left the door ajar, and left that place. Heartbroken but confident, he continued south to the big city. Along the way he avoided obstacles and mutants passed him by. He noticed that, but he didn't care to think about it. He was grieving and probably didn't care what happened to him along the way anymore. After a few days, he heard a sound in the bushes. It was definitely not a monster or demon. It was the quiet rustling of the leaves, as if there was something small. From the bushes slowly came a little boy with a small axe in his hand, and he swung it at Matthew and asked, "Are you not infected?" Matthew answered, "No." So they realized they could walk together to the big city. On the way, Matthew told the boy about the mysterious city where they would be saved. Matthew found a new mission: to bring the boy to that city at all costs. It was evening outside, and on their way they met a monster that walked on all fours and jumped like a large grasshopper, but the creature was human-sized. Matthew held his crowbar firmly in his hand and was already determined to fight back against the monster, when suddenly the mysterious hooded figure appeared and attacked the monster with his already bloody sword. The figure was quick and skillful with his sword, so that the monster had no chance against his mysterious friend. Matthew realized then with his sister, then all the way back in now, he was being helped by the mysterious figure, but for a reason he didn't understand. He shouted to the figure, "Why?" But it vanished again. Matthew and the boy continued on their way into town. Along the way they noticed fewer and fewer ghosts and mutants, but saw their corpses along the way. All the while a hooded figure walked ahead of them and cleared the way for them. Next, Matthew found an old SUV that miraculously started and was running. And so they continued on their way south. Day and night they drove on roads around which they saw fires, dead bodies, and heard screams and cries. But they were safe. When Matthew was already losing his grip on reality from fatigue, he saw tanks in the distance and the military as they drove up. The military was shocked by what they saw, for they had not encountered a single survivor in the area until now, but they were also headed for a large and safe city. They took the car under escort and escorted them all the way to the city. On the way, an exhausted Matthew fell asleep and awoke only when he was awakened by a boy with a cheerful expression on his face. Matthew opened his eyes and saw their column under a huge gate, and beyond the gate was a large dome. Before the gate they were checked for contamination. Matthew was clean, but when they checked the boy, everyone quickly began to fuss and they were taken right into the center of the dome. Inside, Matthew saw vegetation, tents, plantations with crops, and lots of people. It was a full-fledged city, independent of the outside environment. Matthew and the boy were led into a white room in which a man in a white robe sat, and there were many machines. That man told them that the boy had the rarest blood type and they would be able to make an antiviral based on the DNA. As Matthew rested, he analyzed everything that had happened to him and came to the conclusion that the mysterious hooded figure knew about the boy and therefore accompanied him all the way and kept him out of danger. People in town talked about this hooded figure and called it the White Ghost. It helped many on the road in search of the very one who could save the world. Everyone called the hooded figure different names, but Matthew understood that it was something left on the planet to preserve what, not much, was left of humans. More stories on my playlist. Have a scary viewing experience.